Good afternoon. Welcome to the Energy Transition webinar series. Illinois Extension is happy to host another series with the Prairie Rivers Network and various partners that we are partnering with for the whole series, as well as the different portions of today's series. Those co-hosts with us that have collaborated with us for developing this series. Again, the Prairie Rivers Network with Amanda Pankau, who will be introducing more specifically the content and the presenters, as well as just our ongoing partnership with her has been amazing, as well as the Just Transition Fund and USDA Rural Development. We are so grateful for this partnership and this collaboration, have brought in some amazing energy onto our platform here at U of I Extension, and we could not be doing this outreach without you. So we are kicking off this series today that's going to help entities and counties explore state and federal opportunities related to the energy transition and cover programs and other topics that are related to this refocus and reinvestment among Illinois rural communities and transitioning coal communities as well. Without further remarks on my part, just one more big thank you to Amanda Pankau, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nancy, and thanks to Nancy and Lisa Merrifield at Extension for having this wonderful platform for us to help get information out, and for all of you for joining. I recognize some faces and names, so welcome. So again, I am Amanda Pankau. I work on energy and climate issues at Prairie Rivers Network. I've lived in central and southern Illinois rural communities nearly my entire life, and I've worked on issues related to coal transition and now clean energy in Illinois for over 15 years. So as you hopefully know from our outreach materials, today's webinar is part of a 3-part webinar series. So overall, this series is going to explore state and federal opportunities related to the energy transition, particularly for rural communities and coal communities. So today's webinar is focused on clean energy programs for rural communities, mostly USDA rural development programs, but we're going to hear about state and federal incentives. You're going to hear us use the word stackable, meaning these programs, initiatives, and incentives you can use them together. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And then the second webinar is going to kind of take a broader look. We're going to hear from Illinois Department of Transportation, the Illinois Energy Office, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and EDA, and some other state and federal opportunities that are kind of all working together. And then the third webinar is one I'm really excited about. We're going to hear from initiatives and programs, organizations like mine, Natalie and Rachel with the Just Transition Fund, and others that are particularly working to help bring these opportunities to communities that are impacted most by the energy transition. So our communities that are losing coal and other fossil fuel assets. So that's a bit about the series. Let's talk a little bit more about today. You can visit that registration link and find information about who the presenters are for each of those webinars. So today I'm going to kick us off with just a really kind of brief lay of the land about the energy transition in Illinois. We're going to hear from Will Kentworthy with Vote Solar. He's going to tell us about those existing state and federal incentives for clean energy, some of which were just changed and boosted with federal policy. Then we're going to hear from Francis Sawyer with Pleiades strategy, who's going to share information about USDA's PACE program for communities and the New Era program for rural electric cooperatives. And then she's going to kind of take a broader look about looking at all of these resources together, how our communities can plan to take advantage. And then finally, we're going to hear from Callie Heidbreder with USDA Rural Development, who's going to talk specifically about the Rural Energy for America program, or the REAP grant. And this is a grant for rural small businesses and rural agricultural producers. So we're kind of hitting different audiences here, but As we all know, in our rural communities, we all wear different hats, and I'd imagine that people are coming at this from different perspectives, but that we can all help spread the word about all these different programs. So I will share a bit more information about each presenter in the chat as they get going. But real quick, I just wanted to take a wider look about how and why this transition to clean energy is happening. So this growth we're experiencing in Illinois is, happening across the nation as well. These graphs actually show electricity generation trends. I've actually pulled out solar, wind, and coal because they're a bit more interesting. So it looks at the last 10 years and then future projections. So we can see this transition has been underway for over a decade. As we've seen our coal fleet age, natural gas and renewable prices have fallen, and concerns for a warming planet have increased. We do expect this transition to continue and to accelerate. If I threw a graph of battery storage growth up here, we'd see even steeper trend lines. So just kind of a bit of how this is happening and what the time frame looks like. We could have a whole presentation on just these graphs and what's going on, but we're not going to do that today. And that, obviously we all know this transition is not without its challenges, but along with those challenges, we do have immense opportunity, particularly for our rural communities. So that's what today's webinar and the future ones are about, is that opportunity and how to take advantage. We have seen recent state and federal laws seek to capitalize on that opportunity and to also address some of those challenges. So to make sure that these investments are reaching both the people and the communities that need them the most, like our rural communities. So namely the Illinois Climate and Equitable Jobs Act and the federal bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act have really all dramatically transformed the energy landscape for our rural communities with clean energy tax credits and a suite of programs and incentives to deliver clean energy projects. So I want to exaggerate as you're listening today that now is the time. So this transition is happening with or without these federal policies, but they're going to be a bigger benefit to our communities if we plan and take advantage now. So it's not as easy as it sounds. And today's webinar is just a really small part in helping us all connect with each other, learn about these opportunities, and support each other and our communities going forward. One final note is just that there is a lot more than what we're going to hear about today or even in our 3-part webinar series. So if you are coming today and you don't hear something that quite fits your needs, I can almost guarantee there's probably an opportunity for you. So whether it's a brownfield in your community you want to redevelop, or there's a high low-income population that you want to help bring clean energy to, there are so many more opportunities. So reach out to me, reach out to the other experts, and we can get you connected to resources. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Will Kentworthy with Vote Solar, and I'll drop his brief bio in the chat, and Will's going to talk with us about state and federal incentives for clean energy.
Hi, thank you. A little sound check. I guess everything's good. And I'm going to share my screen here. And you should all be seeing a title page. Is that right? Good. Okay, great. Thanks, Amanda. My name is Will Kentworthy. I'm the Senior Regulatory Director for the Midwestern region for Vote Solar. I've been working in a regulatory space for Vote Solar for about 5 years and worked as a developer before that. So what I'm going to talk about today is the opportunities and incentives that are available as a result of federal policy and Illinois policy. And these will sort of be the base of the stack of how things work in renewable energy development in the state, behind the meter renewable energy development in particular. So so we'll start off talking a little bit about the federal clean energy tax credits. There are other incentives that I'm not going to talk about. We're going to focus on the investment tax credit and the production tax credits that are available. And then I'll talk about the main Illinois incentive programs that resulted from the Future Energy Jobs Act in 2016 as updated in the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act in 2021. So, wrong way. Starting with the federal investment tax credit and production tax credits. It all was, and I'm going to provide all these slides. There's a lot more information in all these slides and I'm going to talk about. It all started though recently, the current boom from the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in 2022. And so let's get right to it. There are a number of investment tax, or there are a number of clean energy tax credits that are available as a result of the IRA. We're going to focus on the business tax credits, but there are residential credits also that I'm not going to spend much time talking about, and manufacturing production credits for production of panels, inverters, trackers, and batteries. So all those things are there. And then I posted links to 2 resources there that are sort of the basis for everything I'm going to talk about with regard to the federal programs. That's the White House Inflation Reduction Act guidebook and the guidance that the Internal Revenue Service provides on these different credits. But what you see on the right there is sort of what the potential just in the federal tax credits for projects that are less than 1 megawatt, potentially getting up to 70 or 80% tax credit when you stack the base investment tax credit, the bonus tax credit for meeting domestic content minimums, bonus tax credit for siting and energy communities, and 2 different allocated low-income credits that are available. These are all for business projects. We're going to come back and hit all these sort of in order. Starting with the base investment tax credit, the base tax credits. There's 2 different kinds, and there's an investment tax credit, which is where you get a credit based on the cost of the energy property, or the total cost of the project on your next bill. And there's also a production tax credit, where you receive a tax credit based on the production that's coming off of your renewable energy system. You have a choice for many of these projects, whether you take the investment tax credit or the production tax credit, and that will all depend on what's more profitable and what better suits your needs, cash flow needs, and investment profile needs. And I should have started this all off with a qualifier that A, I'm not an attorney, and B, I'm especially not a tax attorney, but I'm also not talking about any specific projects here, right? So the eligibility for renewable energy credits is all very specific to individual circumstances. But so I'm going to talk about the general, what's available, and then, you know, if you're focusing on a project for your own business or unit of local government, then you would want to be in contact with the developer and your tax advisors. But generally, the investment tax credits are started, and what you see in the table on the right, I'm not going to talk about everything here, but the base tax credit is 30%, and that's been the same for a number of years. The production tax credit is the base for that is 2.75 cents. And, you know, just depending on how your system's configured, one of those may or may not be more advantageous for you. So you would have to figure that out. But let's start with the assumption that the base investment tax credit is 30%. And then you can see that in the middle column on that table where it says 2023 to 2033, you start with the investment tax credit, the base credit at 30%, domestic content bonus at 10%, and the energy communities bonus at 10%. So let's unpack those other 2 bonus tax credits. The energy community bonus tax credit was brand new in the in the Inflation Reduction Act, and basically it says that it was a bonus that is applicable to facilities that are located in what is defined as energy communities, and that energy communities is defined in the statute. It's a complicated definition, so I'm not going to go into it. What you want to know, though, is that a lot of Illinois, and especially a lot of downstate Illinois, is in communities that are expected to qualify for that energy community bonus. So if you have a project that is located in one of those communities on that map, you are most likely eligible for that 10% bonus, and that just goes right on top of your investment tax credit. And we're going to talk a little bit later how this all looks when you put it in practice. And I've put some resources there that are available. This energy communities guidance is brand new. It just came out. So the Inflation Reduction Act passed in 2021. It's taken a long time for the Treasury Department and the IRS to roll out guidance on a lot of these things. It's just now starting to come out. And so this energy community tax credit bonus map that I put here, I think became available just in the last month or two. So this is hot off the presses. We're in the wrong direction again. The domestic content bonus tax credit is another 10% adder that's available to the investment tax credit, and that's not 10% of the base credit. That is 10% of the total project cost. So this one's going to be a little bit harder to get a hold of. The guidance on this, as you see there, came out just May 12th of 2023, but it essentially requires that 100% of all the steel in every part of the project has to come from domestic manufacturing and mining and sourcing. I think the industry is still trying to figure out, like the vendors who provide these products are still trying to figure out how they can make themselves eligible and validate that they're eligible. This guidance is brand new, and they're still working on it. But it is an important part of this total stack. I haven't been in the industry in a couple of years. I don't know if I tried to put together a project right now that would qualify for that, whether it would be possible or not, but it's out there and it's a big deal. It's as you see later on, a 10% of a project can be thousands of dollars. Keep cutting on. I'm not going to go into the low income communities additional tax credits. These are 10% for low income community as defined in the new market tax credit or Indian land or on Indian lands. And there's a 20% bonus for qualified low income residential building projects or qualified low income economic benefit projects. Also, these are very complicated things to qualify for. And as I pointed out at the top of the left-hand block here, these are allocated tax credits, which means that they are competitive and they'll be available for 1.8 gigawatts of projects across the United States. That process, the comment on the proposed rulemaking for that closed in June. There's another part of the Inflation Reduction Act that applies to all of these things, which is if you're eligible for these tax credits, you are eligible for either, if you're a non-taxable entity, for getting what's called the elective pay program. And that means that even if you're a non-taxable entity, you file a tax claim and the IRS will then pay you. It makes it effectively a refundable tax credit. For certain entities that are not eligible for that, they're also eligible for transferability, which means that you earn the investment tax credit and then you can transfer it to someone who can take advantage of it. Moving on, I see Amanda pop back on, which means I have 2 minutes. I'm going to just talk real quickly about the Illinois Adjustable Block Program. There are 3 parts of the Illinois Renewable Portfolio Standard. There's the utility scale wind and solar for large wholesale projects, the Adjustable Block Program for distributed generation and community solar, which is mainly what we're going to be talking about, and the Illinois Solar for All program for low-income customers. Renewable energy credit is basically the form of the incentive here, and it just means that for every megawatt hour of energy generated by your facility, you earn 1 renewable energy credit, which you can then sell. And that is what we're buying. The Illinois Shine Distributed Generation Program is also known as the Adjustable Block Program, is the main program for behind the meter and community solar programs. And there's different categories that are listed here. I won't go into them, but these are the main categories of things that people would be considering. The prices for currently for renewable energy credits in the state are posted here, and you can get to those from what was posted earlier. The other important Illinois incentive that's available that started with FEJA and is updated in CEJA was the smart inverter rebate, and that's at $250 per kilowatt available from the utilities for distributed generation. So this is the bottom line. I put together here, this is just a very rough estimate of what it would cost. I said, what does it look like for a 200 kilowatt solar array that is on a business's rooftop? Let's say that costs $345,000. The base tax credit is $103,000. The energy community bonus credit, $34,000, $34,500. The domestic content, if you're able to get it, $34,500. That means the net cost of the solar array, net of tax credits, gets you down to half of the cost of the system. You add the REC value of the adjustable block program. I estimated that the net present value of the REC contract is about $195,000. It's a very generous program. And you add the smart inverter rebate on top of that, and you are all of a sudden at the net of tax credits and rebate, $73,000 more than you spent to build the array. And then if you add the net present value, an estimate of the conservative estimate of the net present value of the energy of the project, the value of this project is a positive $216,000 project. So you can see it's very lucrative. Just the base of it is very lucrative. I rushed through that, and I'm happy to take questions at the end when the time comes. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Will. Thanks for sharing your email address, and would encourage folks to reach out with questions to Will. And we'll be sure to share presenter slides. I know we always get that question as well. So up next, we have Frances Sawyer with Pleiades Strategy. And she's going to talk with us about a couple specific USDA Rural Development programs that are also one's brand new, one's boosted with new money. And so, what we heard from Will is like these projects can be very appealing economically, even before we add on grants or some of these loan and grant programs that Frances and then Callie are going to talk about. So with that, I'll give it to Frances.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda, and everyone. It's awesome to be here with you. Really, really appreciated too Will's walkthrough of all of the tax credits that are available because, as we're going to keep talking about, it's the stackability of these programs that are making projects more and more just beautifully economical for developers, for communities, as we look to building out and strengthening our energy systems. As Amanda mentioned, I'm going to talk through two of the programs that have come through the U.S. Department of Agriculture that were heavily funded and started during the Inflation Reduction Act. These are the PACE and the New Era program, and both have the ability to really catalyze a lot of funding going into rural energy systems, clean energy systems. And then want to zoom out for a moment and talk about these programs in the context of the broader opportunity of the Inflation Reduction Act. The firm that I founded, Pleiades Strategy, we work with local leaders, rural cooperatives, local municipalities, nonprofits who are working with those communities around access to these programs. And, we're really looking at this from the vantage point of how local leaders can engage with all of these programs and access this funding for their community. So to start, just want to kind of center this, that this is the biggest investment in rural electrification since the New Deal. And so it's a really exciting moment with capital flowing into the space. And this is near and dear to me because 12 miles from where my grandmother grew up, and where I spent many a weekend as a kid, was where FDR signed the original Rural Electrification Act that really kickstarted the advance of energy systems and power reaching to all communities in the country. And so it's really, I think, special that we all get to be a part of this moment in which we are doubling down on that investment, and we're really building the new infrastructure that's going to power us for the next 100 years. The PACE program at USDA, I want to start with this one. It is $100 billion in low-cost loans, and we've got some pretty quick timelines with the review window opening on Monday. To begin, this is open to electrical providers and project developers, and it offers up to $100 million in partially forgivable loans that are specific to utility scale projects that are serving 50% or more rural off-takers. The details of how you apply, it's a simple letter of interest, but that is coming up very quickly, and the window opens this Monday. And we're going to have projects considered on a rolling basis. So it really benefits you to have a project go into the pipeline as fast as you possibly can, as the expectation is that this is going to be a very popular program. Purpose behind this program is really to drive clean energy that is affordable into a number of communities with particular emphasis on vulnerable, disadvantaged tribal communities, and to be able to catalyze new energy projects very quickly. The type of projects that are fundable under this include all commercially available clean energy technologies like wind, solar, hydropower, geothermal, biomass, and we can also include storage projects that are related to that renewable energy. PPAs are a key part of this, and that bankability is going to be a key part of your project eligibility, showing that you've got the off-taker. As we look at who is eligible, it's a very wide swath of entities that are available. You've got private sector, individuals, states, territories, municipalities, utility districts, rural electric cooperatives are available to this program. Same with tribes, Alaska Native villages, and LLCs that are organized across things. So very, very wide eligibility. What brings it together is this focus on, oh my, I just went to my last slide. Let's see if we can get back. Close your eyes. All right. What brings these projects together from all of these entities that are available is that it's really targeted at rural energy systems. And so the program, any project within it, 50% of the population that is served by a particular project must live in a community with a population of under 20,000 individuals or fewer. So really, really focused on deployment of clean energy in rural communities. The program are low-cost loans, and they are partially forgivable, which is great. And standard of 20% loan forgiveness if you meet a minimum of standards. And then you'll see that the total loan forgiveness scales to 40% if the project serves 50% or more of a population in a designated energy community, disadvantaged community, distressed community. So we look at the map that Will shared of energy communities, and many of the Southern Illinois communities are going to be eligible for that 40% total loan forgiveness likely. And then category 3, you've got the ability to have up to 60% total loan forgiveness if you're serving tribal populations or have projects that are owned by a tribal government. So bringing it together, as I said, the program opens on Monday. We know that This is going to be a fast moving opportunity. So take a look in your project pipelines. And if you have one that meets the criteria of this project, it could be a really, really great opportunity to be able to improve the economics of it and really benefit from this additional new funding coming through USDA. The second program that I want to talk about is the New Era program. And this is a big one. It is $9.7 billion. But again, it has very, very quick timelines. This program, run through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, is geared at looking at opportunities for rural electric cooperatives. And here you can see the map of the cooperative networks. These are the cooperative utilities that serve a large portion of the downstate, as well as other communities across the country. And this program is really geared at driving clean energy deployment and emissions reductions within rural electric cooperative fleets. So you have $9.7 billion to unlock funding for renewables, clean energy generation. Importantly, it also includes things like transmission and the grid upgrades that can help you deliver that clean power. And the way that the program is structured, it can support up to $40 billion in total project value, which is really, really just a transformative investment in rural communities. The goals of the program, this one does include a goal around greenhouse gas emissions reduction, alongside economic opportunity, public health, and energy burden goals. And it is a competitive program. So this flexible funding can receive up to $970 million for a single project. That's up to 10% of the total funding available. Can also apply for smaller projects if smaller projects are what are in your utilities sites. And it's really flexible. You can use it as a grant, a loan grant combination. You can use it to refinance debt, but at its base, you have a grant that can be up to 25% of your total project cost, which is huge. That basically means you're going to the store for your energy project, and New Era can give you a 25% off sale for that project. And that's stackable with the tax credits that are coming as well that Will discussed. The project scoring, it is a competitive program, but it only becomes competitive if the program is oversubscribed. And so again, $40 billion in total project value are able to be supported through this project, maybe more. And so getting an application in for any clean energy project can be a really, really great starting step, particularly given the way that they have structured the application window. It does have a very fast timeline. As I mentioned, we've got a letter of interest window that is opening at the end of this month, and it is going to close a month later. And the full application will be due 60 days after your project receives an invitation to apply for that full project. And the expectation is that the project itself that the program funds will be completed by March 30th, 2031. And so this is really long time horizon for your utility planning, but the application deadlines are going to come fast and furious. The good news there is that that letter of interest is designed to be lightweight. It's max 1,500 words. So you're writing a 3-page paper about the project overview, the GHG emissions using a simple tool that the USDA has developed. You can find on their website. We'll share that link. And a description of the co-benefits that the project can drive. Following that first step of the process, top projects are going to be invited to submit that full application, where you'll have 60 days to do a more robust application. As we look at PACE and we look at New Era, I really see these as part of a bigger opportunity for rural energy systems, and they're programs that really kickstart a new decade of investment in rural energy systems. This is a way that we're going to be able to build and own clean energy generation, retire costly and aging assets, speeding beneficial electrification, and benefit from the demand management. Virtual power plants included in some of these programs. You also have consumer incentives that a community and utility can help be an outreach voice for, that can complement your generation activities on the energy front. And together, they're going to be able to deliver community benefits that grow regional economies while addressing energy burden and improving community health. So if we look at this economic development piece, it's really a core part of the way that these programs have been designed. We've got goals around workforce training and development, prevailing wage standards, project diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And it really offers the opportunity to get plus ups and to drive collaborations to be able to build the energy systems that will power us for the next 100 years. As part of these projects, local leaders can also develop fundable community benefits plans. These are plans that are actually written into the New Era program and other programs within the US, the Inflation Reduction Act, that allows a community to see and benefit from specific co-benefits to a project, and they can actually be funded as part of the grant. These do not have to be ready by the time that your New Era deadline is arrives, but can be part of that longer term plan to make sure that community voices and the co-benefits of energy projects are brought into effect. Many of which, as Will mentioned, go back to energy communities, repowering existing infrastructure, putting that to use, and really driving investment into communities that have powered us for the past 100 years. And as we do this, we're able to also direct investment into disadvantaged communities and help those who stand to benefit the most from these new investments. So each of these programs, we've got additional tax incentives and other lenses by which you can look at investing specifically into communities that have high environmental and social inequities. Here we have the Justice 40 communities mapped to rural electric cooperatives, showcasing how they go, and where you can get those additional tax credit bonuses and drive up the total value of a project. But putting all these things together is going to take a lot of local leadership. And so rural communities are really poised to benefit from these if and as local leaders step up and show the way. It's a tremendous planning opportunity. There's a lot of resources out there. There's folks who are really excited to connect you to those resources, and thinking about it, collaborating about it with federal agencies, with state and local leaders, developers, key partners here, private sector, bringing in community voices, and your local utility will help bring all of this together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Frances. And I think you got us back on time. So double thank you. And love your final note about local leadership. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, so many of us in our rural communities wear many different hats. And so maybe this is your next hat you're going to put on, is being the clean energy advocate or ambassador of your rural community. So now we are going to switch gears a little bit and focus in on another USDA program that we'd love for you to share with the rural small businesses and ag producers in your community. So we have Callie with USDA Rural Development to share more about the REAP grant program.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. And thanks for having us here today. Just as Amanda mentioned, my name is Callie Heidbreder, and I am the energy coordinator here for the state of Illinois. I work with USDA Rural Development America program, which is gaining significant traction as of lately. It's been around for years. It's always typically been appropriated in the Farm Bill, but given the additional dollars that have come to this program through the Inflation Reduction Act, has really ramped up this program and generated a substantial amount of interest throughout the state, which is obviously a great thing. As we think about the Rural Energy for America program, who is eligible? Oh, looks like my slides are not moving. Give me just a second. There we go. So we think about who's eligible. Again, as I mentioned, these are grants and loan guarantees for the installation of either renewable energy systems or Amanda had mentioned earlier, ag producers. And in order to be eligible as an ag producer, you have to be able to demonstrate that at least 50% or more of your gross income comes from agricultural operations. And again, you can think beyond just the standard, row crop farmers, that can be flowers, that can be vegetables, whatever the case may be. It doesn't necessarily just have to be our standard corn and soybeans like we often think when we think of ag producers. The other type of eligible applicant is a rural small business. And the item I want to stress on this rural small business is it has to be a for-profit rural small business. Nonprofit entities are not eligible for this program, unfortunately. In order to be an eligible rural small business, it's a two-part eligibility requirement. One is ensuring that the proposed project site address resides in an eligible rural area. Typically, those eligible rural areas are those with a population of 50,000 or less. However, when in doubt, we have an interactive eligibility mapper where you can drop in that exact project site address and it will tell you right away if it is or is not in an eligible rural area. Typically, where I tell people to caution and definitely go to the map is if you are closely in close proximity to a highly populated area, double check that mapper, because sometimes those highly populated areas can bleed out into some of those what we would consider what you and I might consider rural, but just double check that map when in doubt. Second part of the eligibility criteria is ensuring that the business in concern falls beneath the size standard for the particular industry in which they're engaged in, as defined by the Small Business Administration. So we follow the size standards table that the SBA has put out. So what I tell applicants is take a look at that table, identify the industry code that best fits the nature of your business, and just ensure that you fall beneath that size standard that's associated with your particular business. Typically, it's usually a income level or a certain number of employees or something along those lines. So if both of those criteria are met and you are a for-profit business, then you would be considered an eligible rural small business. Thinking about how these funds can possibly be used. So energy efficiency improvements is one of the types of projects. These projects are those where we see a documented reduction in energy consumption. So it's typically where we're taking an older, less efficient piece of equipment and replacing it with a newer, more efficient model, where we can see that documented percentage of energy savings, either through an energy audit or an energy assessment through this proposed project. What are some examples of some of those projects? Could be a lighting upgrade. Maybe you're taking your older, less efficient lighting, replacing it with LED bulbs. Maybe it's an HVAC improvement. One of the most popular ones that we receive from our ag producers are grain dryer replacements. That tends to be very common here in Illinois. We've seen some with irrigation motor replacements. You can think about your grocery stores, maybe refrigerator replacements or freezers, things like that, where you can see, again, you're taking that older, less efficient piece of equipment, replacing it with a newer, more efficient model that's going to consume less energy. Those are the items to think along the lines of for those energy efficiency improvements. The other type of projects is our renewable energy systems. This has probably been the one that's on the forefront of everyone's mind as of recent. But with renewable energy systems, purchasing a new or refurbished or retrofitting a current renewable energy system would be considered eligible as a renewable energy system. Got a little asterisk here. Residential purposes are ineligible underneath this program. So if you've got, many of our ag producers are sharing a meter with a home that's maybe powering their grain bins or their shop or whatever the case may be. In those situations, it doesn't automatically make the project ineligible. We just have to be able to see that at least 50% or more of the proposed energy to be generated by the system will benefit the farm or the business. So it doesn't automatically mean it's ineligible when you're sharing a meter with a home, but does require a little bit of additional analysis to ensure that that project would be eligible. Types of renewable energy systems, like obviously solar is certainly that's on the forefront of everyone's mind. Geothermal, wind, things of that nature would certainly be something that could be eligible as a renewable energy system as well. Ineligible projects, in a nutshell, if it's illegal, it's not, if it's illegal or not critical to the installation of the project, it's likely ineligible. And just as I mentioned, residential projects are ineligible underneath this program. But if it's a cost that is not critical to the proposed project at hand, then it likely cannot be included in those costs or be considered an eligible project. Some details. So just briefly touching, so we do have a loan guarantee component to this program, and I want to stress it's a loan guarantee. It's not direct dollars to the applicant. So this would mean the applicant would work with a financial institution of their choice to identify the rates in terms of that loan. And then the financial institution would in return apply to rural development in order to obtain a loan note guarantee for that particular project. So obviously it's a great tool as a risk mitigation from the bank standpoint. And just another little extra tool to possibly make the deal happen for either your ag producers or rural small businesses. Minimum loan is 5,000, max is 25 million, and the loan amount cannot exceed 75% of eligible project costs, and we would guarantee 80% of that dollar amount. You can do a loan grant combo. And this is what I'll get to in the next couple slides as far as the grant details. So right now our max grant amount is up to 50% of eligible project costs. So that would mean that if you did the 50% grant, that would leave you with that 25% for the loan guarantee. But again, that combined funding cannot exceed the 75% of eligible project costs. Grant amounts, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, this has significantly increased. Previously, it was only up to 25% of eligible project costs. Now we are up to 50% of eligible project costs. There is a little caveat. Some project types cannot obtain the full 50%. Those are mostly biomass and biogas type projects that are only eligible for up to 25%. So, if you ever had a question on what your project is eligible for, just let us know and we can get you those additional details. Max grant amount for energy efficiency improvements are 500,000, which was recently increased, and then renewable energy systems is $1 million. And again, it would be 50% of eligible project costs, or that 500,000 or $1 million, whichever is the lesser of the two. Just as I already touched on what the eligible project costs were previously, ineligible project costs, again, just as I mentioned, if those items are not critical to the installation of the project, then they're likely ineligible. These are just a few examples of some projects that we have done. Here's an energy efficiency improvement lighting project at a Ford dealership. They're in Peru, Illinois. Replace those lighting and on their car lot. Here is a renewable energy system. I know we're all familiar with what solar looks like. This was on a car wash there in Fairbury. This was kind of a different energy efficiency improvement project down south for a pond aeration system for a fish pond. So we've done one of those projects. Here's another solar on a bank there in Galesburg. And here's obviously a tower grain dryer there in Longview. Just a few examples of what we can do. So, one more solar project. I know everybody we're well aware with what solar looks like, but there's another example. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Be happy to discuss the program, discuss your specific project, and answer any questions that might come up.
Thank you so much, Callie. And I asked our presenters, well, Callie had a 10-minute slot today and she was literally at 9 minutes and 57 seconds. So double thank you to you also. And I do love those real examples as a downstate person, recognize a lot of those town names, and it's just fun to see the different businesses in different places taking advantage. And it's truly an accessible program. I live in Monticello, Illinois. There are one small business and one ag producer that have gotten REAP grants here. So totally doable. If you're, chamber, Main Street orgs want to learn more about this to help share this information with your rural small businesses, let myself know, let Callie know. We'd love to bring this information to your community. So we're ready to turn to Q&A. Before I do that, we're going to do a quick poll question to kind of gauge what you learned about today's info. So there it is. We'll just take about 30 seconds here for folks to answer the poll. All right, we'll give that a few more seconds while I move us along here. Thanks so much for doing that. I am going to very briefly throw back up the webinar 2 and 3 details so that you can get registered. Well, if you registered for today, you're automatically registered for those, but please do share this with other folks in your community, nearby communities that might benefit from those discussions as well. And we'll be sure to get the registration link in the chat for you. So thanks again for sharing those or doing that poll. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll move on to Q&A here in the last 5 to 6 minutes or so. So I did see a couple questions come across, and I see a few of us have already started answering those questions, but I'll just, looks like Francis did clarify that the New Era program from USDA Rural Development is a specific funding opportunity for rural electric cooperatives. So please share that information with the board members and staff of your rural co-op. As with the PACE program, very time-sensitive opportunity. We will see that New Era Rural Co-op funding opportunity open up in the month of August to get those letters of interest in. And as Francis shared, those letters of interest are very doable. Even if your co-op, you know, maybe this is still a bit new to them, it really is an opportunity to not let pass by this August. Okay, so moving on, Francis, I'm going to ask you from Joe. He has a question about the PACE program. If you could clarify what you mean when you say serves a local community. Is that where it's located? What confuses him is that there are rules in Illinois as to what kind of entity can actually provide electricity. So yeah, so can you answer Joe's question there?
Certainly, and I'll preface this by saying that I am not in the weeds on Illinois' specifics about those entities and kind of the legal arrangements between them. But when the PACE refers to a project serving a community, they're looking at a project that's located within a community or a project that falls outside of the geographic area of that community, but is providing energy or other benefits specifically to that rural community.
Thanks, Francis. And Joe, you've got my email address, so if we can help you dive in a little bit deeper there, we could also, so we have a rural utility service as part of USDA that's rolling out this program. There is a Illinois Midwestern contact, so we could get you in contact with them as well, Joe. But drop me an email if we need to help you with more info there. I see Will has also answered Kate's question in the chat, but I might just let him expand on that. So Kate asked, now I've lost Kate's question. Okay, will workforce development be part of the Justice 40 requirements for renewable energy development? And how will those interact with current prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements from IRA Section 48. So for those who don't know, Justice 40 is an initiative to ensure that 40% of all of these opportunities, not just energy opportunities, but opportunities from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, reach the communities that need them the most. So disadvantaged communities, environmental justice communities, other underserved communities. So that's the Justice 40 initiative. And so, Will, I'll let you answer it in the chat, but if you want to answer it verbally, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'll defer to Callie and Francis on the eligibility for the REAP programs or for the renewable energy or for the rural energy programs. But as far as there are prevailing wage requirements, as Kate pointed out, that are applicable to the investment tax credits. And there is a size minimum on that below which it's not required, but it applies to most projects. And then there are also more stringent, I think, is my understanding, requirements that are applicable to people who are participating in the Illinois REC programs and the adjustable block program or Illinois Shines programs. And those are outlined in the program guidebook that the IPA puts out that I linked in the chat.
Thanks. Well, and I see that Henry snuck a question in here. Is there any clarity on if domestic content is a requirement for elective pay projects under 1 megawatt? Any of my presenters want to tackle that one?
Not a requirement. There's a bonus, there's an adder for it.
Thanks, Will. Any final questions? I don't think I missed any in the chat. I will, it's 1 o'clock, so we're at our end time. I will hang out here just a few more minutes. If folks do want to drop questions in the chat, I can get those to our presenters. I will be sending out a follow-up email with some of the slides, anything that we linked in the chat, fact sheets, maps, things like that. I will have a bullet point list of hyperlinks to resources so that you don't have to grab them from the chat here real quick. And so, yeah, I'll hang out here just for a few more minutes. And if folks want to put questions in the chat, we can follow up in the email. Nancy, any final words from Extension before we sign off here today?
Just University of Illinois Extension's very grateful for just the numerous amount of effort put in on the part of multiple entities to get this outreach out today. And of course, we are grateful to the participants who are online today and everything you do in your counties and communities. And we're looking forward to seeing you back here on the 21st on Friday for our second portion. And I'll see you in your inboxes as well to share those program materials. Many thanks again to our presenters and experts today. Just very thankful for your time and expertise.
Thank you, Nancy and Extension, and everybody for joining. I'll hang out for just a few more.